Welcome to the SIV Skin Microbiome series. I'm Kiran Krishnan. I'm a research microbiologist, and I'm going to be here guiding you through your understanding of the skin microbiome. In particular, how the skin microbiome impacts the outcomes on skin. Keep in mind that the skin microbiome is a very complex ecosystem, and it changes from different areas of the body. But the skin microbiome certainly impacts virtually every feature that you care about on your skin. Things like wrinkles and fine lines and dryness and hyperpigmentation and inflammation, including things like eczema, psoriasis, acne, all forms of aging of the skin, and then finally even the skin barrier. So the skin acting as a barrier becomes compromised by the microbes on the skin. And we do a lot of things to harm the microbes on the skin, but there are things we can do to help it as well. And that's what we're going to explore throughout this series. In this episode today, we're going to start with the basics around how the skin microbiome is structured, what it tends to look like from the face down to the body, and so on. We'll also look at some of the interesting facts and figures around the skin microbiome. And then I'll give you a quick overview on all the types of features of the skin that the microbiome of the skin has an impact on, right? And then in subsequent episodes, we'll go deeper into each of these. And of course, we'll always talk about solutions and tactics and things to preserve the skin microbiome. So let's dive in. So let's look at our skin ecology. To start off with, we have about 20 square feet of skin on our bodies, which represents one of the largest organs in our system, and I think most people have heard that already. Now, on that skin, we have over 1.5 trillion resident bacteria and up to 1,000 different species, right? So it's almost a 35-to-1 ratio of skin cells to bacteria and microbes. So for every one skin cell that you have on your outer layer of your body, you've got 35 bacteria for every one. And so we think about when we shed skin all the time, when we shower, bathe, walk around the house, when we exfoliate, what we're shedding is 35 times what we can see as dead skin as microbes and bacteria. So we're constantly sharing our microbes and bacteria within our individual ecosystems. In particular, areas like your home, like your office, and other areas where you spend a lot of physical time, we tend to exchange microbes with others quite a bit. And there is an impact with other people within this space that is clearly known. If you've got somebody with a really dysbiotic skin microbiome or dysbiotic gut microbiome in a given household, based on the microbes that they can shed into the environment, they can actually disrupt the microbiomes of the other people that live in that same household as well. So if you've got, clients, if you're a skincare professional and you're taking care of somebody's skin microbiome, it becomes really important to convince them to bring their families in, or at least do one or two things so that their families also can take care of the skin microbiome, right? Even if they don't come in for services, maybe you can send them home with products or send them home with some tips and tricks of maintaining the skin microbiome. The most common genre on the skin are Propionibacterium bacterium, Corneum and Staphylococci. There's lots and lots of different species and phylums and so on the skin, but these are the most common genre that you find on the skin. In addition, we have both classes of microbes on the skin. We've got transient microbes and resident microbes as well. The difference is that the transient microbes can hop on the skin from the environment, and they can last from hours to days on the skin, but then they hop off again. And the resident microbes are much more of the permanent microbes that now live on your skin, and they tend to live on your skin more permanently. Now, the transient microbes do have an impact on the resident microbes. So they're quite powerful. Even though they hop on for a short amount of time, they do hop on, and as a result, they have an impact on the immune system, and they have ways of either competing with or enhancing the growth of the permanent microbes, or the commensal microbes, if you will. So these transient microbes become really important to keep in mind. Now, this is where the benefit of doing things like mud baths and being out in nature and not over sterilizing your skin and allowing more transient microbes to end up on your skin actually has a long-term benefit for the skin, because many of those transient microbes can be beneficially impactful to the resident microbes. Now, there's different ecosystems in different parts of the body. The ecology of the face is different than the rest of the body because the face is a sebaceous area of the body. It's got very high oil levels, as you know. It produces a lot of oil, and as a result, the face has a lot of anaerobic environments. So if you imagine the pores in the face, there's a lot of oils clogging up the pores, lots of the cracks and crevices within the face itself. As they're layered in with oil, no oxygen is allowed to get through that oil, so it creates an anaerobic environment. And because of the high oils and the anaerobic areas, the face tends to have much lower diversity in terms of microbial distribution than the rest of the body, right? And that's because there's very few microbes that can actually live in a oily anaerobic area, right? So these microbes that tend to predominate the face are microbes in the category of Propionum bacterium. So these are lipophilic microbes, meaning they love oil and they do well on the face. So on the face, you do not want a high diversity of microbes. In fact, as people get older and they start to age and you start to see age-related symptoms, you actually are starting to get a higher level of diversity on the face, which is not necessarily a good thing. You also don't want too much Propionum bacterium and too much of certain categories of Propionum bacterium. For instance, Propionum bacterium acnesis can be a real problem because when it's overgrown, it can drive the formation of acne lesions, right? So with the skin, it's always about balance, and it's always about correcting imbalances to maintain the skin microbiome. Then you've got the ecology of the arms and the backs and the legs. So these are the dry areas of the body. And as a dry area, it tends to have much higher levels of diversity. And in fact, on these areas, you do want diversity, right? So it makes a lot of sense to have different kinds of products and different approaches to the face versus the body. We've seen for a long time that there's face lotion and body lotion, face soap and body soap, and so on. And part of that is sensible because the skin microbiome on the face and the body are so distinctly different, right? So on the body, for example, you've got a mix of Propionum bacterium with Staphylococcus, Micrococcus, Corneum bacterium, Streptococcus, and so on. You can have upwards of 1,000 different species that can live on these dry areas of your skin. And as it turns out, we want more diversity on these other parts of the skin. If we start to lose diversity on the arms and backs and legs and all that, we become at higher risk for things like eczema, psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, and so on. So on the face, we don't want diversity. We want a lot of very supportive Propionum bacterium. And on the rest of the body, on the dry parts of the body, you do want diversity because the diversity provides resilience. Now, I want to give you an overview of skin functions and the role of the microbiome in both a balanced and dysbiotic state, so you can start to understand what are some of the areas that the skin microbiome actually impacts. So I'm just going to use a pointer here so that I can better point these things out. So when you look at the barrier function, right? So in the positive case, when you have the right microbes growing on your skin, the right microbes support tight junctions. So these are the gaps in between the skin cells. They support the production of ceramides. So ceramides is the fat layer underneath the epidermis, which then protects the skin from things going through, but in turn, it also protects moisture from evaporating out of the skin. So the ceramide layer is incredibly important for the skin to act as a barrier, and it also acts as a barrier against moisture loss, and of course barrier integrity as well. Now in a dysbiotic condition, dysbiosis leads to increased transepidermal water loss and barrier breakdown, right? This is where the studies on TUL, if you will, transepidermal water loss, come from. It's a good surrogate marker for barrier function or barrier dysfunction in the skin, and a lot of this is controlled by microbes in the skin. So when you look at immune defenses, the skin microbiome educates and trains the immune cells for tolerance and for defense, right? What does that mean? Well, there's lots of things that your skin will encounter that you don't want your immune cells to go after, because it's going to create lots of inflammation and heat and damage to the skin if your immune system is attacking everything that your skin comes in contact with. So not attacking everything your skin comes in contact with is called tolerance. And building that tolerance is in part the responsibility of the microbes in the microbiome, because those microbes will tutor your immune cells on the skin to teach the immune cells on the skin what is friend and what is foe, what it should attack and what it shouldn't attack. And that's a really important feature of the skin microbiome. You want tolerance, right? Because you don't want to have to go out for the day, walk down the street, encounter some environmental particles, and then break out in a big rash. That would be intolerance. And then on top of that, it's the defense as well. So for all the microbes and things that end up landing on your skin, you want your skin microbiome to enhance the immune function so you have proper defense mechanisms. Then if you have a negative microbiome, if you have a dysbiotic microbiome, you tend to get a pathogenic shift, which can trigger chronic inflammation and immune overreaction. So this can create hypersensitivities to things. People that have get lots of rashes and eczema and so on their skin. You can also develop infections much easier. Everything from basic staph infections all the way to MRSA. All can become a higher risk of susceptibility as a result of the dysbiosis. So when you look at modulation of inflammation, good bacteria on the skin, the right balance produces anti-inflammatory compounds, things like short-chain fatty acids and bacteriocins. These are really important to maintain and manage redness and inflammation on the skin. When you have overgrowth of the dysfunctional bacteria, they become pro-inflammatory, like Staph aureus, for example, or C. acnesis, which is Cutibacterium acnesis. These increase flare-ups, increase sensitivities, increase redness on the skin all the time, right? So this is a problematic version. Wound healing, of course, it enhances re-epithelialization, which is the formation of the epithelial cells. Microbes can stimulate that turnover and help wounds heal faster and with less scarring as well. You can end up with delayed healing if you have a dysbiotic skin microbiome because of that imbalance of microbes, and you can end up then having more biofilm production and potentially more pathogens taking over as well. Sebum regulation is another big component. It regulates lipid composition via lipase, which is an enzyme, and biofilm activity. So you don't want too much sebum production. Higher sebum production can lead to clogged pores and the development of acne lesions, for example, both on the body and especially on the face. And so when you have good microbes on the skin, they regulate the sebum production and lipid composition. They have enzymes that can break them down. They regulate biofilm production as well. Under dysbiotic conditions, you increase sebum oxidation and you end up with comedones, right? This is how you end up with an overproduction of sebum and you clog up pores and you end up with comedones. It's through this dysbiotic skin microbiome that does not reduce sebum production, that does not break down the fats and the oils that are on the skin. It in fact can trigger sebum production, increasing sebum oxidation, and then of course comedone formation as well. Another very, very important area is pH balance. The microbes on the skin help maintain the acidic environment that the skin needs. Keep in mind that your skin is supposed to be acidic. It's supposed to be around a pH of about 4 to 4.5 or so. And if it gets any more basic or less acidic than that, then you have a severe risk of fungal overgrowth on your skin. So a lot of people that tend to get fungal overgrowth, whether it's on their feet or other parts of their skin, it's because the pH of the skin has gone awry, and the pH of the skin is heavily controlled by microbes on the skin. And then, of course, if you're dysbiotic, you lose the types of microbes that maintain acidity on the skin. You start to get more of an alkaline pH on the skin, and then it encourages the growth of pathogens, including mold and so on. UV protection, There are some microbes within your skin microbiome that degrade UV byproducts and support the repair. They can reduce some of the oxidative stress that your skin ends up experiencing as a result of UV protection. This is a very important feature because we know the sun can be quite damaging to the skin and of course lead to all kinds of risks. So we want to be able to quench some of those unhealthy byproducts of UV exposure. Microbes on the skin can actually do that. And when you have an impaired microbiome, you may decrease DNA repair and antioxidant activity, which then encourages more damage from the UV radiation itself. Hyperpigmentation, this is another really interesting area because certain commensals can downregulate melanogenesis, right? Which is the overproduction of melanin, which leads to that age spot or that hyperpigment, and it can also downregulate and reduce oxidative stress. When melanocytes, the cells that make melanin, undergo a lot of oxidative stress, they can become what we call senescent, which is a zombie cell, and they can just sit there and produce a lot of melanin without actually dying or turning over. And so microbes on the skin prevent this. And then if you are dysbiotic and you've got a dysfunctional microbiome, you tend to get an overgrowth of pigment-inducing microbes or inflammation-inducing melanogenesis. And so these are microbes that can actually induce more melanin production, leading to more hyperpigmentation. So one of the themes I hope you understand through watching this is that the microbiome of any part of the body, including the skin, can either be your best friend, helping you, protect you, repairing, doing all the wonderful things, or if it's dysfunctional, it's not only not doing those things, but it's actually driving dysfunction. It's driving inflammation. It's driving hyperpigmentation. It's driving dryness and wrinkle formation and so on, right? So we've got kind of this spectrum of relationship with our microbiome, whether it's on the skin, on the gut, it doesn't matter. It seems to be the same across the body, where on one end of the spectrum, it's your best friend and it's helping you with everything. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's your worst enemy because it's driving every dysfunction in that system, right? So that is really important to keep in mind. And this is why at SIV, we talk a lot about biome balancing and how important it is to continuously balance or rebalance the microbiome, because the microbiome very easily starts to move towards that area where it's not only not your friend, it's becoming one of your enemies. Right? So we want to think about that and always keep that in mind. Wrinkle formation and skin aging, right? Good microbes, when you have a healthy skin microbiome, it can reduce oxidative stress and support the formation and the integrity of collagen and elastin as well. So you've got the two structural elements that maintain the tautness and the uniformity of the skin. The skin microbes play an important role in expressing those proteins and then also protecting them through oxidative stress. When you have pathogens and you have dysfunctional microbes on the skin, you increase reactive oxygen species, that's what ROS is, and you reduce collagen production and you increase something called MMPs, matrix metalloproteinases, which are enzymes that break down structural elements within the body, including the skin, including the structural elements of the skin, thereby leading to aging and age-related degeneration. So not only do you get fine lines and wrinkles, you actually lose the structure of the skin. The skin can become saggier and looser and so on, right? So that's a difference there between microbes that protect against aging versus microbes that can drive aging as well. Moisture retention, so you've got all of these microbes that can protect natural moisture factor and so on. And of course, we talked about the ceramide layer as well that also protects moisture on the skin. And then if you have dysbiotic versions, you have the loss of microbial support, which reduces NMFs and skin hydration. Pathogen defense, we talked about this. You've got good microbes on the skin, beneficial microbes. And when I say good microbes, I mean both the permanent microbes, but also the good transient microbes, because there's good transient microbes that hop on the skin and do a lot of good on the skin before they hop off. So keep in mind, I'm including both of those when I say good, and I'm including both of them when I say the bad microbes on the skin. It's not only the bad permanent microbes, but you can also have some dysfunctional transient microbes hopping on there as well. So you can produce these beneficial microbes will produce antimicrobial peptides, and it competes with the pathogens. On the other side, when you have dysfunctional microbiome, you've got nothing competing with the pathogens. They are pathogens themselves, and they colonize the skin microbiome. They promote infections, biofilm formation, and so on. When we look at allergic sensitivity, it promotes immune tolerance and reduces allergen penetration. Now, this is really, really important because we have an epidemic of allergy and asthma and all that in the Western world, especially among kids. And a lot of it is due to something called the atopic march, where allergens actually can penetrate the skin and enter the body and enter the system as a result of skin barrier damage. And once it enters into the system through the skin, your body overly reacts to the presence of those allergens and antigens. And as a result of that, you end up with an allergic type response. There's going to be one of the episodes coming up where I'll go through much more details about the atopic march, because it's a very, very important topic given the epidemic of allergies and asthmas that we tend to face. And again, back to that immune tolerance, right? We want that immune tolerance as well. And if you have an imbalanced skin microbiome, it can trigger immune hypersensitivity and dermatitis as well, right? So you don't want that other end of the spectrum. Acne formation, like I mentioned, it balances sebum degradation. On the good side, the good beneficial microbes, it'll degrade sebum and it'll prevent the overgrowth of C. acnesis. Cutibacterium acnesis used to be called Propionibacterium acnesis. On the imbalanced side, you get too much C. acnesis growth, which drives inflammation and lesion formation in the sebaceous glands, in the pores, which eventually ends up being acne-like lesions. In the case of rosacea and eczema, a beneficial skin microbiome promotes microbial diversity. Like I mentioned, most of the body you want high diversity, and that suppresses inflammation, right? In a dysfunctional skin microbiome, you tend to have low diversity or dominance of certain types of bacteria, which can exacerbate flare-ups. So this is like Staph aureus, for example, is overgrown. It's going to cause flare-ups. It's going to cause more inflammation. And then finally, in psoriasis activity, beneficial bacteria, balanced skin microbiome can reduce inflammatory cytokine production via microbial metabolites that have a direct influence on the immune system and on the immune system's function. And then on the other end of the spectrum, when you have a dysfunctional skin microbiome, you increase IL-17, which is a pro-inflammatory marker, and TNF-alpha, which is also a pro-inflammatory marker, which leads to the formation of plaques or the worsening of existing plaques, right? So a good skin microbiome, a balanced skin microbiome, can actually be protective against psoriasis. A dysfunctional skin microbiome becomes a driver of psoriasis and other inflammatory conditions on the skin. So just a couple of examples of conditions driven by skin microbiome dysbiosis. We talked about eczema and atopic dermatitis. It's absolutely driven by an increase in pathogenic bacteria like Staph aureus, right? That seems clear. Psoriasis, like we talked about, is driven by a low diversity, so disruption in the balance that results in low diversity within the skin microbiome. And you start to see an increase in things like Corneum bacterium, Staphylococcus, and Streptococcus. And then acne is a perfect example of a skin microbiome-driven condition because it's driven by an overgrowth of Cutibacterium acnesis, a pro-inflammatory version of that microbe getting into the pores, getting into the deeper areas of the skin, triggering sebum production, and then inflammation that follows the sebum production, and then the formation of a comedone. So hopefully you understood from these illustrations that it's really, really important to pay attention to the skin microbiome, right? Because, you know, all of this will start to make sense as we go deeper into this topic in subsequent series, because what we really want to do is get a little bit more into the mechanisms of how some of these microbes impact some of these outcomes, but then of course what to watch out for, what drives this kind of dysfunction on the skin, and then of course what can we do about it, right? So those are all really, really important things. So this information should give you the basic understanding around the form and the function of the skin microbiome. In subsequent episodes, we'll talk a little bit deeper about what specific bacteria do, the way they impact skin turnover, skin function, how the gut-skin axis functions, the immune system around the skin, and much, much more. So don't forget to like and subscribe so that you stay tuned and you don't miss any of the information coming out, because I promise you that everything that you will hear in this series is impactful to the way you practice professional skincare. So thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned.